Today's guest, Kevin Kilty. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good to have you. You're a University of Wyoming instructor retired
I
with us
am.
today. What in?
I spent the last 12 years of my teaching career as a mechanical engineering instructor at University of Wyoming.
And your fundamental expertise and enjoyment in retirement centers around what?
Being as big a problem for people as possible. So
I
I
like
to go to public service commission meetings, county commission meetings, and so forth, and make commentary when I think it's appropriate
Sure.
to help people understand issues that are actually rather difficult.
Well, one of the things that you've brought to our attention here at the Talk Shop is the changing environment in energy,
Yes.
and those are obviously some of the commentaries that you've expressed comment at public opportunity.
Yes.
And tell us more about that change that's going on in our world.
Well, as you know, for probably the past 20 years, people have been on a mission to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere through an enormous number of processes, but energy production is probably the largest, and agriculture is another. I might just mention here that the two biggest advancements in the human race since the Paleolithic have been combustion and agriculture, and the war on CO2 makes war on both of them. And that's a difficult position to be in. But if we are looking at what they call clean energy sources, and they're only clean from the standpoint that they don't release carbon dioxide, those energy sources don't behave like combustion energy sources. Coal, gas, and nuclear isn't exactly a combustion process, but it's a thermal process once again, and it behaves to a great degree like a thermal power plant. The thermal power plants, you can dispatch energy right up to their maximum capability anytime you need it. Wind and solar, you're dependent upon daylight and weather and a lot of other things, and those are fundamentally different.
And then storage is also another further aspect. To store what you can generate by wind and those is also limited.
You're right, and lots of people don't. One of the problems with understanding this power system is that the numbers involved are enormous, and people have trouble with numbers this big, and then they don't fully comprehend the units involved in energy and so forth. But just to give you an idea of the size of the numbers involved, the amount of battery storage that would really be required. Now, let me back up just 1 second and talk about balancing areas for electricity. The country is divided up into electrical balancing areas where we try to dispatch power and so forth to meet demand minute by minute all day long.
Region by region, huh?
And we here in Laramie, I'm pretty sure, because we are supplied mostly by Rocky Mountain Power, we are in what's known as the Pacific Corp East balancing area. And to provide enough, let's say we were going to try to store energy in a reservoir, and we were just going to let the water out of the reservoir when we needed it. To provide enough storage for Pacific Corp East, which is only 2.2 million customers, we would need a reservoir and a power plant approximately about half the size of Hoover Dam and Lake Mead. Now, Lake Mead drains, a third of the western United States at least. It's an enormous task to store energy in sufficient quantities to make up for when wind and solar don't show up.
Right.
And people just fundamentally don't understand that.
Energy adequacy, another topic area. Tell us about your thoughts with respect to adequacy.
You know, the electric grid requires many, many things, but the most fundamental thing for the electric grid is that it be adequate, that we're able to deliver enough power to meet demand minute by minute all through the day and night. And if we can't do that, and it isn't just meet demand, because we ought to have a little bit of margin in case power plants go down, maybe 20% margin, something like that. But if we can meet demand and have 20% margin, we have an adequate power system. What happens when wind and solar go away? Well, I looked at just about 2 weeks ago. Let's just look at October the 21st,
Okay.
just 2 weeks ago. And let's look at 1 o'clock in the afternoon here in Laramie. And the total demand in Pacific Corp East was about 8,400 megawatts. And part of that was internal to Pacific Corp East, people here in Laramie demanding power, people in Rock Springs demanding power, and so forth. And the rest of it was Pacific Corp East exports a lot of power to other people.
Okay.
We export a lot of power to Idaho Power Company to the west of us, and they turn around and export power.
California.
They send it on to Washington, Oregon, and California if it's needed. Lots of people don't realize that in Pacific Corp East, we send power to the Los Angeles Power and Water Department, and sometimes bring power back from them. So we needed about 8,400 megawatts. And how was that being covered? Well, coal was doing about a quarter of that, and solar was doing about a quarter of that, and wind was doing about a quarter of that, and a little tiny bit was made up by natural gas. Now let's go 10 hours later. We're going to go to 11 o'clock in the evening. The sun has set, so there was no solar at all. The wind died. There's no wind power.
Less in the night.
Less in the night. And so people were around us were still demanding power. So we really needed to be able to produce about 6,600 megawatts, even though, that's later in the night. People aren't using as much power. How are we doing that? Coal stepped up and did the job. Coal doubled its output to make up for wind and solar. And you say to yourself, well, Dr. Kelty, maybe you're a sneaky sort of guy and you just chose a particular day that you knew would be really tough. It turns out that if you look in the winter, you can find 4 or 5 days like this in January. You can find 6 in February. Through the spring, you find more and more days like this where the wind just doesn't blow, and it doesn't blow at a time when it's also dark.
What happens when power drives heat for homes in the winter of Wyoming? Are we to depend so heavily on these changing demands towards green, so to speak, power?
That's an interesting topic, and we talked about maybe 4 things to talk about here, but that's a really interesting one is that we're changing demand. And we are going to, if people really manage to force everybody to use electricity, we are going to change peak demand from summer, where the demand was largely air conditioning, and we're going to put it into the winter season where it's largely heating. And that's going to cause a big change. But one of the biggest changes it will cause is there is inadequate infrastructure in your electric distribution system and in the transformers in neighborhoods and so forth to handle that. Let's go away from Wyoming for just a second. Let's talk about local law 97 in New York City, because New York City is, of course, in the news right now.
Right.
Local law 97 says all buildings in New York have to stop using boilers. You can't burn natural gas, and you have to install heat pumps. There isn't anywhere near the infrastructure to distribute energy for running those heat pumps.
Let alone the manufacturing of those pumps is behind the curve in terms of delivery.
Well, you've done some research on this, and so you know that these problems are legion. There are problems everywhere. There isn't the labor, there aren't the materials, there isn't the manufacturing base, there isn't the transportation, and it goes on and on and on like this. Local law 97 in New York says all of this has to be done by 2030, or we're going to hit you with enormous fines. They will wipe out people's equity in homes and apartments and condominiums and so forth. And Mamdani, who just got elected mayor of New York, says he is going to push this. He's going to force this issue. But
the agenda will not go away.
The agenda won't go away, but people don't understand there's no capacity to do this. You're asking for pigs to fly.
When it comes to the conversation on adequacy, wildlife suffer along the path of these these travels of migration patterns for eagles. They're affected with wind power. We do so much to protect so many special interests in our world, but we fail to look after all of them all of the time. But yet, at different times, ironically, we have tunnel vision, don't we?
Terrible. You know, it's for some reason this agenda of not releasing CO2 to the atmosphere is becomes so important it overrides all other considerations. And as you know, here in Wyoming, we're in what's called the Central Flyway, and that's for eagles and whatnot. And the Central Flyway has always been important because it was largely impediment-free for birds. But now we're putting up wind turbines absolutely everywhere. There are impediments to birds every place. And I don't know, probably won't even mention his name, but there's a hard-working wildlife biologist who lives here in Laramie, who studies eagles and has for probably 5 decades. And he has noted that among golden eagles, the deaths from turbine strikes exceeds all other deaths. And turbine strikes account for about 46% of these eagle deaths in this Central Flyway from what he has sampled. And that is